Welcome to this special LinkedIn Live on the adoption of artificial intelligence in enterprise. I'm joined today by Tim Sears, HTEC Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer. Welcome, Tim, and thank you for joining me. In this session, we are going to try and separate the hype from the reality. So we're going to explore pitfalls, challenges in getting ROI from AI, but also focus on some pragmatic guidance on how and where to start. So over the next hour, we'll break these down into some specific areas, each tackling a critical aspect of scaling AI, from identifying when to use AI or when not to use AI, and provide some guidance on how to pinpoint the business ROI and explore what AI actually makes sense. And Tim, I haven't mentioned this to you before, but to add even more weight to these topics, I have this morning received the results from our global survey on AI and edge across the industry. And when asked to name the top 3 things stopping C-suite from being further ahead in the AI adoption, we see at 43% difficulty in integrating AI into existing systems and processes. We see at 42% a lack of alignment across the executive team on the AI strategy. And we see at 39% uncertainty about which AI capabilities or building blocks they should prioritize in the AI strategy. So clearly we've got a lot of C-level focus on AI, and therefore whether you're a business process owner, a technologist, or an executive leader, this session is designed to offer you practical insight and real-world example on helping how to navigate your AI journey. So let's dive in. So Tim, let's start with the big pictures. How would you describe the current state of AI adoption in enterprise? In other words, what's the reality behind the hype?
Yeah, hype is certainly a problem. It's a very tricky environment leaders find themselves in now, an enormous amount of hype, which reflects a lot of interest. It also reflects, real potential in the technology, but it's in many ways, a new technology that is difficult for the folks running enterprises to figure out how to put into practice. So a lot of enterprises are dabbling, they're in pilot purgatory with a lot of experimentation, limited production deployments. And, companies in some companies are treating it like a technology problem rather than a business transformation problem. And that can lead to them getting stuck. So we think the gap here isn't the technology, it's the fundamentals. Clean data, clear use cases, and organizational readiness. AI is very challenging because it's involving non-technical leaders in fairly technical building process, and that's uncomfortable for many people.
And what are you seeing in those conversations, and what are you hearing on how companies are currently choosing to add business value with AI, and how do they balance that with the need to be cost effective?
Yeah, I think being cost effective is winning, is succeeding somehow. And what we're working with companies that are succeeding by being narrow and specific in choosing use cases. They're being smart about not trying to proceed on a broad front, but to build the muscle, to build confidence by getting some early wins. They're targeting high friction processes where AI delivers immediate measurable ROI. You can think about automation in finance, HR, legal workflows. Those are kind of obvious cases. There's other use cases that are actually helpful driving revenue as well. And so that helps them figure out how to learn how to add value in months and not years, and avoiding budget burn. Yeah.
And we've had a number of executive dinners in our series, and you've been part of the one in London as well in the US, Tim, and thank you for that. And
Great.
What we have in the organization is they either have issues in identifying the strongest use case or operating AI at scale. And with all of that, the key questions remain: where do we start and how do we succeed? And I'm going to add one additional question to that, because you've kind of referred to it a little bit, which is in one of those panels, the panelists actually commented that too often, as echoing what you've just said, it's a technology mindset, and there's a lack of business process owner involvement. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I think a technology first mindset is a killer. I mean, it's an easy mistake to fall into because it is technology, but we need to marry it with business outcomes. You know, we need to treat use case identification as a business exercise, not an IT workshop. You know, and create and create partnership across the board between business and technology. You know, like in a way like we've never done before. So, you know, and then, yeah, I think that's the main message here. It is a business problem ultimately. It looks like a technical problem when you approach it, but when you're done, you're going to realize it's a business problem that involves a lot of org change.
Yeah, and to help companies tackle this, where do we start, and how do we start? We've developed a triage framework for AI adoption. Can you walk us through how that works?
Yeah, great. Yeah, sure. You can start with why triage at all, right? You know, many organizations need to build confidence and maybe a little execution muscle. So what we're suggesting is that people surface a broad set of use cases and then sort them into the most desirable. Uh, Eliminate use cases where AI can be embodied in a nice product. You know, you can be a smart buyer for those things and not have to have executives focus on that so much. You know, if AI is not quite ready, you know, we can wait for AI to improve, and you know, that's a simple triage. Then they have a number of use cases where leaders, and this is where the real payoff comes, when leaders look at AI and they see the capability and they see ways to use it with their own proprietary data. So those two things together are key. It could be customer data, it could be production data. And the idea there is that product builders out there in the world won't be running to your rescue. They won't be able to guess your needs. You're going to have to take fate into your own hands and reimagine business processes, your business processes with AI at the heart of it. And then find a way to build it yourselves, maybe with help. And that's really the strategic imperative for AI today.
And how can, you know, what are some of the practical steps that can make sure that ROI is at the heart of that? How can they be really clear? And, you know, how can they get organizational alignment in the leadership team to actually get them there?
Well, great question. I think the magic word here is ROI. You know, we often tell our clients to look for, you know, those opportunities that can offer 5 to 10x ROI. And this is this kind of thing that gets and holds the CEO's attention. This makes it, you know, gets you beyond the dabbling phase, gets you beyond the experimentation phase. And then alignment can follow much more easily. You know, ROI is really key. And we try to treat it as simple arithmetic. Definitely not treat it as a buzzword. And really all the leadership should know what we're aiming for, and frankly, the rest of the team as well.
And it sounds so simple when you're explaining that, I have to say, but I also know the complexity and the emotion that sits within the leadership team. So what feedback have you received in your interaction with companies, you know, when you discuss this particular approach, this triage approach? But also I'd love a little bit of storytelling around how well aligned are they internally, and what are some of the things that they come up with in terms of why they're not?
Well, stories, yeah. So there's one company that we visited. We spent about half a day with them and talked about our framework and approach. And at the end, we had about an hour's worth of discussion, which was the most interesting part of the day, where they took over, and it was all the C-level leaders. It was about a $100 million revenue company, small enough to be able to go fast and have all the C-level leaders in the room sharing their use cases. Surfaced about 6 different use cases. And it was pretty clear that they needed to have a common language to talk about and do the trade-offs so they could figure out where to start. And so ROI is really helpful there. Everybody in the room understood that. It seems like a fair and sensible way so that they can, you know, pick the first use case. All the ideas are actually pretty good. They should probably do them all, but they want to get their feet wet and build muscle and build execution capability. And so the ability to have that conversation actually leads to a sense of relief. You know, the team starts to believe, you know, we got this when they know where to start and how to get an early win.
And can you, so we've talked about, you know, thinking and getting that initial alignment. But the second area that you advocate is something that we're calling the HTEC build principle, which then takes companies to that second step of that framework. What are those principles?
Sure. Well, the reason that we have them is when we have a project that's launched, we want to move fast. And so long experience here tells us that clarity is the key ingredient to moving fast. Clarity in the minds of all the team members that are building. So our build principles are really just a short set of lighthouse questions that everyone on the team should know about and even have their own answer to them. The word lighthouse is doing some work here. A lighthouse is something that you keep looking at in order to avoid crashing into the rocks. And so these questions are something we keep asking throughout the life of the project, and they really represent a way to maintain alignment and actually troubleshoot when things are going wrong. I mean, I can go through the questions if you like. They're fairly straightforward.
I think that would be really helpful because from what you're describing, it's not a one-time exercise. You know, you kind of go a little bit further and you use them as a validation step, if I'm understanding this correctly. You know, so it would be helpful to get some examples.
Yeah, so imagine that you've surfaced some use cases, you've done the triaging, you've identified our high ROI projects, you've self-selected one to get started. Then it's time to build. So now you've got to build a cross-functional team that can work together to build the use case. It could be a small team, large team. It depends on the use case. But the questions actually apply across the board in many, many situations. So the first question is, what are we building? We need clarity. I mean, that sounds like a pretty obvious one, but I've been in rooms where that's not so obvious. You know, if it's a specific type of system, there might be inputs, there might be outputs. We're not talking about how the system got built. We're not talking about AI. We're not talking about training. We're just talking about what's this thing going to do as a piece of software in our company. I mean, these days with Gen AI, it could actually be fairly complex. So getting clarity around that is really a key. And I wouldn't even let the conversation go further if you don't have that clarity. You know, if we're using AI, of course, the next question is, where is the data? And this has been a question for a long time. The machine learning projects have been going on for quite a while now. And digital transformation and getting data is in the enterprise is a big topic. Where is that data? And that's for training and that's for inference. These are different but closely related topics. Mm-hmm. This is a place where there's partnership needed. Businesses need to support AI engineers in order to have the data necessary to build that system and run it. The third question is one that's easy to punt on, but I suggest people handle that as early as possible. How are we making a deployment decision? If we're upgrading an incumbent system that's human powered, you know, how are we going to know when the AI system is ready? So that talks about, you know, accuracy and performance and all sorts of things that are really the green light. Well, how are we going to get a green light for deploying the system? An easier way to think about it is if you have an existing system and you're upgrading the components, you know, you've got to have some objective measures to decide if you need to upgrade an LLM or something like that. And so these are the questions that, you know, need to be answered as kind of question 3 here, how we're making the deployment decision. A fourth question is what are we tracking when we're in production? There's obviously the deployment decision is there to reduce expense, drive ROI, all the metrics that lead to those great things. But then, you know, you put a system in place and there's all sorts of other metrics needed to see if the lights are on and diagnose and troubleshoot and take action if something breaks. You know, in the world of systems, you know, there's all sorts of metrics that are needed to manage the system as well. And so those 4 questions sound a bit technical, but actually they're the core of transforming your business and really shouldn't be thrown over the wall to the engineers. They should actually remain in the hands of the business leaders and with partnership from engineering. There's a 5th question, which, you know, if you're an AI engineer, you've been waiting for this question, which is, what are the AI engineers doing to build the system? What building blocks are they using? What techniques are they using? This is the fun part for the AI engineers. And sometimes they're so enthusiastic, you know, they may lose track of those other 4 questions I mentioned, which are critical. And that might be okay if we've got partnership where that's so strong that those lanes can allow the engineers freedom to build it in the best possible way, hopefully, you know, with replaceable components and all sorts of other good things. So what we recommend is that people really focus on the first 4 questions. Don't overmanage the deeply technical work of the AI engineers, but make sure they're set up for success by having partnership on the top 4 questions and letting the AI engineers, you know, do their thing, so to speak. So the goal overall is to create clarity. What are we building and how we're building it? Partnership, responsibility, and lanes so that we can move as fast as possible.
I want to come back on the clarity and consensus piece, because I mean, it sounds so easy when you're just asking in a question, but there's so much emotion across the teams, and how do you take the emotion out of this and ensure that people stay aligned on the project goals?
It's a tough one. Honestly, I think our goal is we can't eliminate emotions. People care. There's going to be emotions. Our goal is maybe to keep the positive emotions in, at least for the build teams. That we can let the leaders figure out their own emotional issues, but let's keep the negative emotions out. And so winning is a great way of keeping the positive emotions going. So I would recommend keeping your eye on those lighthouse questions, and then things have a chance to go well. Getting confusion somewhere on the team will definitely lead to some sorts of issues that require troubleshooting by leadership later. So, of course, things can change. We can uncover blockers that couldn't have been anticipated, and changing business conditions that are different from when we started the project. So the ROI outlook might change. So that's another reason to start with a high ROI project. Then you have a big enough goal that it can survive some bumps in the road and, any feelings attached to that.
And you've touched on data, and data and AI go hand in hand. Can you just expand a little bit more on the role of enterprise data readiness when it comes to doing, in terms of making sure that the AI initiative is a success?
Yeah, I mean, there's a long history to this question. Data readiness is the difference between a demo and a deployed system, right? You need quality, accessible, well-governed data, not just big data. A lot of AI failures, past and present, can go back to garbage data, fragmented data, no data governance. So getting a feel for the data maturity early is important. Can you trust the data? Can you access it? Can you explain where it came from? These are all important questions. If those answers are no, you might be building on sand. Okay, so that all sounds kind of sad. But I think the good news is that digital transformation, which may be cleaning data and getting data readiness up is is far, far easier to undertake today than it was 10 years ago. Projects that took 3 years could take less than a year, I think, in that front. Also, we're in a world now where AI itself can help with data adapters that can let you build on products and systems that weren't quite designed to work together. And so to some extent, you can parallel track some of these efforts. I wouldn't let that be a complete, obviously quality helps, but I wouldn't let it be a complete deterrent to looking for places where AI can add value.
And we've touched on alignment across the executives, but you also said something around involving the business owners as part of this, HTEC build principles. Why is this cross-functional collaboration so critical?
Well, it's essential, really. I mean, cross-functional collaboration ensures that you're solving the whole problem: technical, operational, regulatory, human. So think about this. An AI-powered business is going to have more technical operations, enabling us to elevate and automate work. Your people managers are going to need to be at the heart of this change, or else it won't happen. So I would not view this as something you throw over the wall to engineers. AI leadership involves everybody getting involved in productive ways.
And that includes change management as part of that piece. Okay.
Yes, I think there's an enormous amount of change management that needs to be attended to.
And I mean, I know the answer to the question, but change management is sometimes something that people feel is either, something that you bring in from the outside or something that is done at the executive level. How do you structure that alongside the life of the project or the life of the AI initiative that you're trying to bring together?
Well, it starts with the C-suite. Those are the folks that need to plant the flags and signal commitment to change, get us beyond the phase of experimentation. It has to extend down and across the organization so that builders can build and won't get blocked at the last minute by unexpected requirements. That's why we emphasize clarity in our build principles. They help surface the details and the decision process needed to get to production. At the same time, you probably need to bring in experts that know how to use the building blocks of AI systems. But but business leaders should not leave the room. Don't expect one directive to make the job happen. And just always remember that those lighthouse questions require ongoing partnership. So I didn't make it a simple answer. I mean, maybe it's simple to say it, but it's not easy to live it.
Yes, that is true. Change management usually isn't. But you just mentioned the building blocks again. So let's get into the building block piece. Okay, so we've established that we need a strong business ROI mindset. We've covered how we define what we're building and why we're building it. Now, answering the question to what kind of AI do we need? What are those building blocks that are relevant to us achieving our goal? And how would you advise this to be done?
Okay, so there's a large set of building blocks that are, some of which have been around for a while, but then with the advent of Gen AI are a little bit newer on the scene. Large language models, really, if you think about it, the last 3 years have been kind of an era of large language models. Of course, there's Gen AI is being used in voice as well as visual tasks with image generation, image classification. But the big revolution is being driven by large language models. Large language models take text in and take text out, but they can really perform an enormous variety of tasks. So the key phase I think that we're in right now is figuring out where you can deploy large language models with support and help to make up for their shortcomings, but also take advantage of the human language interface that's getting people's attention so much.
And in terms of those building blocks, so that if I remember in a previous conversation, you mentioned that we had those building blocks, and there was a process that we were then going through in terms of there was the fine tuning piece. There's avoid over customization. There's like when is it really good enough? Can you just talk a little bit about those principles and how they fit into that building block framework?
Yeah, to some extent, there's a bit of a black art here. The lines of what to do, when to use fine tuning, for example, can be a little bit blurry. So I'll talk about that for a minute, and then I'll talk a little bit about broader set of criteria. So, for example, for the fine tuning, sometimes generic models can get the job done, which is kind of a neat thing. You can get this amazing power for free, so to speak. And then, but if you find a system that's dealing with technical jargon from your domain in almost another language, then fine tuning becomes an important technique. The difference is that fine tuning embeds domain knowledge that generic models lack. So, you maybe take healthcare documentation, for example. We know one case where an LLM struggled with medical terminology and clinical workflows. But after fine tuning on data specific to that domain, accuracy in this case jumped from 70% to 94%, and clinicians started to trust it. So fine tuning isn't free. It can require extensive curation of data before you can do it. But the knowledge of how to do that is much more widespread now, and value can come from that. Sometimes you can accomplish a task or similar task with just using vector databases and prompt engineering. But those are more expensive in inference time and may be less effective. So this is where AI engineers can help. I do think that overall it's important to ensure that we build these fairly complicated systems with components that can be upgraded over time. So that's something that is fairly easy for business leaders to understand and see, and so they can kind of monitor that, and leaving the black art to the folks that know how to work on that.
And you talk about the black art, the dark art. What's your advice when it comes to sort of navigating the technical complexity without getting overwhelmed? What role do partners play in that particular process?
Well, I think one role partners can play is relieving you of the requirement to become AI engineering experts overnight. We've talked about how there's a big role for defining business processes that you want AI to help with. So, one way to think about that is to partner with firms who have done this repeatedly across different domains. people that know how to bring frameworks and accelerators and playbooks to the table so that you're not inventing from scratch. There's not much reason to do that, actually. And a good partner also is a partner. I mean, they help train your team while you're building so that you're not dependent long term. And I think a partner that can help focus your energy on defining the business problem clearly, and then helping you translate that into technical execution. Above all, I would say don't treat what you're doing like a one and done transaction. Use the same kind of mindset you might use to pick a family lawyer or a family dentist, somebody that you want to go back to and deal with from time to time.
I love that analogy. The dentist does hurt, though. We've talked about people a little bit, and we've talked about change management. Let's just come back to that for a second.
Sure.
And specifically to how people work with AI and how that impacts, or what an AI driven operational model might look like. What does it actually mean to become an AI driven business?
Well, it's an interesting challenge for business leaders. I mean, some are very excited by it. In an AI-powered business, some things are different. Our leaders are more like designers. They're reimagining their business with AI at the heart of it in certain business processes. Managers change too. They are less people managers and more like product managers in the web app world, if that makes sense. They own and operate a tech stack and use metrics to troubleshoot. It's a bit of a challenge there too, that some are excited about and some are a little fearful about. And then these managers know how to drive change via technology as well. And then you're thinking about team members. You see a lot of people worrying about their jobs and things like that. But the world of work in some ways becomes better. Team members do less repetitive work and more exception handling. And so in the end, everyone in the business is actually more valuable.
And that's something that is a very positive outlook on how AI can help, as opposed to one that is focused on, say, cost cutting or things like that. It's really about augmenting and having the human become the partner of the AI, and that probably also helps as part of the change management process when you're trying to deploy AI.
Yep.
Now, what new metrics? You run an entirely new business. You've got a new operation model. You've got new roles. What metrics are needed to manage this change? And also, in addition, we talked about fine tuning, and at some point there's going to have to be a feedback loops in terms, from the employee using the tool back into for continuous improvement.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Traditional productivity metrics, I think, can break an AI-augmented role. So we need to track things like exception resolution time, how often we're overriding the AI, how well we're improving the system. Are the humans actually catching mistakes made by AI? Human in the loop is the phrase that's used there. Are they able to implement change in the system itself by suggesting retraining or component upgrades? And one major point, which we haven't really touched on yet, and it might be one of the most important points, is that, in the future, feedback loops are everything. They're going to be the way that you turn a static AI system into a learning one. Without these feedback loops, models can decay and teams can disengage maybe. But if you bake them in, you have a system that makes your business smarter over time. And one way to think about that is, a lot of people are talking about agentic, and agents are running off doing all sorts of things. But let's go back a step and look at human in the loop. One way to think about AI is that the AI can be making suggested decisions, and the humans in the loop can be making actual decisions. And so a really simple feedback loop that's important to capture is what was the suggestion and what was the decision, and maybe what was actually implemented, hopefully the same thing. And that type of data set and that mindset, even without designing it in on day one, will actually create the right data to have AI-powered businesses that can get better over time.
Now, we've talked, when you and I have spoken before, we very much talked about HTEC wanted to be much more pragmatic and taking a more simplified approach demystifying some of this. And obviously in the conversation that you're having with executives, how are they appreciating this kind of approach, as you describe it, of stepping back and kind of just going back to, square one effectively, and making the decision based on a business idea as opposed to technology? What's their reaction to you having those conversations?
Yeah, I think it's essential. I mean, the whole market is changing in the sense that so many more folks that are, let's say, not as technical are having to confront the reality that AI is going to change the world. It's going to change their industry. It probably ought to change their business. And so, if you think about tweaking our business, we've done lots and lots of deeply technical work for deeply technical executives who kind of knew what to ask for in many cases. Obviously, we were contributing, but now we have a much bigger audience of folks that are needing to understand, what's going on. So it's important not to just, bowl people over with our how smart we are and how technical we can be. It's really an opportunity to put more technology to work, but we have to work with people that have not been as well trained in the technical side of things and understand that it's important for them to be involved and that they have a lot to bring to the table in terms of telling us in their own way what is really needed so that we can help them put AI to work at the heart of their business.
I love the way you phrase that. Tim, thank you so much for such a rich and practical perspective on the evolving road of AI in enterprise. From understanding the barriers in different industries to implementing frameworks, validating model, managing organizational change, it's clear that the success with AI requires both strategic clarity, but also operational agility. So for those watching, we hope each segment that we've covered has sparked ideas and offered guidance you can apply in your own teams. And as we continue to refine our approach through our AI engagements, dynamic content, and new operating models, we really invite you to stay connected with us and be part of the conversation. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Tim. Really appreciate having this conversation with you. And we'll see you again soon.
HTEC.